Tuesday, November 11, 2024. Just after 10 a.m. Birmingham Airport stirred with its usual rhythm. Families reunited at the arrivals gate, business travelers rushed toward taxis, and holiday makers wheeled suitcases across polished floors. On the surface, it was another ordinary morning, a place of journeys and reunions. Yet beneath the hum of routine, the airport itself was preparing to play a far darker role. Birmingham was about to become the silent stage for audacious crimes, where greed and deception moved through the same halls as innocence and expectation. As passengers streamed through security checks and baggage carousels, three very different plots were already in motion. Each would expose how Britain's airports have become more than travel hubs. They are battlegrounds, where international trafficking networks clash with law enforcement, and where one mistake can collapse an empire. By the way, if you have enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to subscribe, like and share this video, as it will encourage us to create more videos on UK organized crime. On the surface, she was every bit the picture of respectability. Farzana Cowzer, a 54-year-old grandmother from Bradford, carried herself like many women of her age, family-oriented, soft-spoken, and seemingly focused on the ordinary responsibilities of daily life. To her neighbors, she was someone who balanced motherhood and grandmotherhood with the quiet dignity that defined countless households across Britain. She blended into the rhythm of her community without question. But beneath that carefully constructed image lay a secret life. Farzana wasn't just a mother or a grandmother. She was the architect of a multi-million-pound drug trafficking pipeline, a woman who had managed to intertwine family loyalty with international crime, transforming her household into a small but tightly organized syndicate. Investigators would later describe her as the linchpin of an operation that moved staggering quantities of cocaine from Mexico to the United Kingdom, right through the halls of Birmingham Airport. What set this case apart from countless other trafficking networks was the depth of personal betrayal woven into it. Unlike typical kingpins who often shield their closest relatives from the dirtier aspects of their trade, Farzana deliberately chose to involve her family at every level. Her children weren't spared. Her daughter-in-law wasn't spared. Even trusted friends of the family were pulled into the conspiracy. For her, blood ties and marriage bonds weren't protection, they were leverage. She understood that loyalty runs deepest in family, and she exploited that devotion to build a smuggling pipeline hidden behind the veneer of family unity. Her eldest son, June Shafak, 33, became her right hand, helping to coordinate the logistics of travel and oversee operational details. Then came Mohammed Amir Shafak, 28, who acted as a courier, collecting and transporting the bags that contained their fortunes. Younger members of the family were also drawn in, Ume Mohammed, 22, and even Hamza Shafak, who was just 17 years old when the operation was active. Involving someone barely out of his teenage years underscored the recklessness of Farzana's choices. She was willing to gamble with the futures of her own children for the promise of illicit wealth. The betrayal didn't stop there. Sarah Hussein, her daughter-in-law, was absorbed into the plan, asked not to stand aside but to participate. Instead of being protected from danger, she was made part of it. Then there was Safaner, just 19 at the time, another of the youngest caught in the web. Finally, even a close family associate, Khalid Abdul Qawi, 36, was roped in. What emerged was not a loose arrangement of occasional helpers, but a structured hierarchy with Farzana at its peak. She called the shots, designed the strategies, and ensured that her family's loyalty would double as her workforce. Her betrayal wasn't just criminal, it was maternal. The brilliance, and the darkness, of the Cowzer operation was in its simplicity. To outsiders, their movements looked like nothing more than short family holidays. Trips were booked to familiar European destinations, Dublin, Amsterdam, or other short-haul cities that didn't raise suspicion. The travelers carried light luggage, sometimes no checked bags at all. But there was a hidden logic behind the bookings. Their return flights weren't random. They were carefully timed to coincide with arrivals from Cancun, Mexico. Mexico wasn't just a vacation hotspot. It was the origin point of the cocaine pipeline. Through corrupt contacts overseas, shadowy figures who coordinated shipments and ensured the bags made it to the right flights, preloaded suitcases packed with cocaine were checked onto flights bound for Birmingham. The family's role was deceptively simple: intercept. When their short-haul flights landed, the family blended seamlessly with crowds in the baggage hall. As passengers from both flights merged near the carousels, Farzana's couriers would position themselves by the belts unloading luggage from Cancun. All they had to do was lift the unaccompanied bags off the belt, pretend they were theirs, and walk casually out into the arrivals hall. There were no hidden compartments. No elaborate concealment devices. The cocaine wasn't tucked into secret linings or disguised as legitimate goods. The brilliance of the plan was its banality. Who questions a traveler lifting a bag from a carousel, especially when they already look like they've just arrived from a weekend in Dublin? It was a choreography of normality. Casual clothes, calm demeanors, quiet efficiency. If anyone looked twice, the group appeared no different from holiday makers retrieving luggage after a short trip. That illusion was everything. To succeed, the family had to blend into the background, to move like shadows hidden in plain sight. Their calm behavior was their greatest weapon. No nervous gestures, no suspicious glances, no frantic movements. Each smuggling run relied on the same formula. And for a time it worked. From August to November 2024, investigators believe the family pulled off at least 5 successful operations, moving drugs with near-military precision. Every journey strengthened Farzana's belief that her system was foolproof, that the ordinary mask of family travel would continue to protect her. But while they perfected the art of deception, they failed to account for the one constant variable: surveillance. By early November, the National Crime Agency, NCA, had been monitoring the group closely. Patterns had emerged: unexplained short trips, suspiciously timed returns, and familiar faces lingering near baggage belts. Quietly, investigators gathered intelligence, built a timeline, and prepared for the moment to strike. Before we continue, don't forget that what you are watching took us hours of both research, editing, and voicing to able to get it across to you. We plead that you show us your support by just subscribing to this channel and liking this video, as it will encourage us to create more video like this. Thank you. That moment arrived on Tuesday, November 11, 2024. As the long-haul flight from Cancun touched down, Farzana's couriers slipped into position. CCTV footage would later show them standing calmly among other travelers, their eyes fixed on the carousel where the cocaine-loaded bags would appear. 6 suitcases in total. Each one packed with blocks of cocaine. Each one a fortune. The couriers lifted the bags effortlessly, loading them onto trolleys, moving toward the terminal exits. On camera they appeared calm, almost too calm, wheeling their haul out into the open, just like any family returning from a holiday. But outside, officers were waiting. In the car park, just as the group began loading the luggage into waiting vehicles, the quiet patience of weeks of investigation exploded into action. NCA teams moved in, surrounding the suspects in a coordinated strike. Within moments, 6 individuals were in custody, and all 6 suitcases were seized before leaving the airport grounds. When the suitcases were opened, the scale of the operation finally came into focus. Inside was an astonishing 180 kilograms of high-purity cocaine. Experts estimated its wholesale value at £5 million, with a street value soaring above £14 million once broken down for distribution. Photographs released later by the Crown Prosecution Service showed neatly wrapped bricks of cocaine stacked like building blocks of the empire Farzana had been constructing. To the family, it was meant to be their fortune. To the investigators, it was the final proof of a conspiracy that had twisted family loyalty into criminal enterprise. For years, Birmingham Airport had served as a silent accomplice to the family's deception. The blending of ordinary travel with criminal purpose had fooled countless travelers, perhaps even airport staff. But on that November morning, the illusion collapsed. What had looked like just another family trip became the dismantling of an empire. A grandmother once trusted by her community was exposed as the ringleader of a cross-continental network. Her children, once seen as ordinary young adults building futures, were revealed as pawns in their mother's dangerous game. And Birmingham Airport, once again, proved itself not only a gateway for travelers but a battlefield where organized crime and law enforcement collide. While Farzana's syndicate represented the careful orchestration of family loyalty turned criminal, not all drug busts at Birmingham Airport involved such sophistication. Sometimes it was a single careless mistake, a dealer undone not by precision surveillance but by his own arrogance. Airports are often seen as fortresses of security. Every bag scanned, every passenger checked, every movement monitored. Yet for many seasoned traffickers, arrogance convinces them that these checks are just another obstacle to walk past. In February 2016, one such man stood at Birmingham Airport's departure gate. Majid Hussein, a local drug dealer whose reputation in the city's underworld carried weight. To those who knew him, Hussein was no small-time courier. He was a man who had already built a name and an empire in Birmingham's drug trade. Yet on this day he was reduced to a single passenger, standing in line like everyone else, holding a bag that would expose the true extent of his criminal life. Hussein wasn't a novice. He had moved drugs before. He had money, contacts, and the kind of influence that comes with running a thriving criminal business. Yet, on that February day he made a mistake so simple that investigators would later struggle to understand how a man of his experience could be so careless. Inside his hand luggage, packed without disguise, without concealment, was a single wrap of heroin. Not tucked into a hidden lining, not disguised in toiletries or clothing, but sitting inside his carry-on as though it were nothing more than an afterthought. When security officers performed a routine inspection, the discovery was immediate. The heroin was seized and Hussein was detained on the spot. In that moment his confidence collapsed into panic. What seemed like a minor find, a wrap of heroin in hand luggage, was enough to trigger the suspicion of experienced officers. To them it didn't look like the casual possession of a user. It looked like the sloppiness of a man who had grown arrogant in his trade. What began at the airport was just the first crack. Within hours of Hussein's detention, investigators secured warrants to search his home address on Nansen Road in Salt Lake, Birmingham. If the airport arrest was a stumble, the home raid was a complete collapse. When officers entered Hussein's property, they were confronted with the reality of who he truly was. This wasn't a man dabbling at the edges of crime, it was a dealer at the heart of a toxic operation. The first shock came in Hussein's own bedroom. Beneath his bed, officers uncovered a suitcase packed not with clothing or personal effects, but with 1 kilogram of heroin and 4 kilograms of cocaine. The street value of these drugs alone was estimated at £250,000, a figure that confirmed Hussein was far from a small player. But the drugs were only the beginning. Hidden in the property was an arsenal of weapons. Among them, a semi-automatic handgun, fully capable of lethal use, was discovered alongside 27 rounds of live ammunition. This was no casual weapon kept for protection. It was the kind of firepower associated with gangs ready to defend territory or enforce debts with violence. Even more disturbing was a stun gun cleverly disguised as a mobile phone. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary piece of technology, but in reality, it was a concealed weapon designed to incapacitate unsuspecting victims. Its very design spoke to deception, a willingness to mask violence behind everyday objects. Officers also seized an air pistol, another reminder of Hussein's preparedness to intimidate or injure. Then came the final revelation, the profits of his trade. Hidden away in the property was £300,000 in cash, bundled into stacks of banknotes. Each bundle was a silent testament to the scale of his dealings, to the countless transactions that had turned addiction and suffering into wealth. Together, the drugs, the weapons, and the cash painted a chilling picture. This wasn't just a dealer making a mistake at an airport. This was a man deeply embedded in a network of crime, living at the intersection of narcotics and violence. When Hussein's case reached Birmingham Crown Court in August 2016, the prosecution laid out the evidence piece by piece. The drugs, the firearms, the ammunition, the cash, it was overwhelming. Hussein, perhaps realizing there was no way out, chose to plead guilty on the opening day of his trial. The charges he admitted to were extensive. Possession of a prohibited firearm. Possession of a disguised firearm. Possession of ammunition. Possession of Class A drugs with intent to supply. Possession of criminal property. The admissions confirmed what investigators had suspected from the start. The wrap of heroin at the airport was never the full story. It was only the loose thread that, when pulled, unraveled an empire. During sentencing, Judge Patrick Thomas QC offered a sharp assessment of what Hussein represented. He described the combination of drugs and firearms as a toxic mixture, one that posed a direct danger to the wider public. The message was clear. A man who could stockpile narcotics while keeping lethal weapons at hand was not simply a dealer, but a threat to the community. Hussein was sentenced to 12 years in prison. But even behind bars, his punishment wasn't finished. Under the Proceeds of Crime Act, prosecutors pushed to reclaim the wealth he had accumulated through illegal activity. In December 2017, the court ruled that Hussein had benefited by hundreds of thousands of pounds from his empire. He was ordered to repay £295,000 within 3 months or face an additional 3 years on top of his 12-year sentence. A further £33,000 in criminal benefit remained outstanding, to be reclaimed once more assets were identified. For investigators, Hussein's downfall was as fascinating as it was frustrating. This was a man with the discipline to build an operation that moved significant quantities of Class A drugs, with enough money to stockpile hundreds of thousands in cash, and with the ruthlessness to keep firearms ready in his bedroom. Yet he was undone not by an elaborate sting, not by a confidential informant, but by his own arrogance. He walked into Birmingham Airport with heroin casually packed in his hand luggage, as if his reputation and his confidence could carry him through security. It was a miscalculation that destroyed everything. Majid Hussein's empire didn't collapse because of police ingenuity alone. It collapsed because he underestimated the smallest detail. His downfall serves as a reminder that in the world of organized crime, it isn't always the complex plans that fail. Sometimes, it's the simplest oversight, the kind that makes an empire look untouchable one day and leaves it in ruins the next. For all his weapons, wealth, and influence, it was a single wrap of heroin that cracked open the empire of a Birmingham drug dealer and left him behind bars, stripped of his fortune and remembered not for his power but for his carelessness. By late 2021, Birmingham Airport had already seen its share of trafficking plots unravel. Some were dismantled by weeks of surveillance, others by careless mistakes. But the story of Uzziah Rashid, a 35-year-old man from Oldham in Greater Manchester, showed yet another truth. Even calmness and composure are no guarantees of success when you're carrying a fortune in narcotics. It was November 2021, and Rashid had just landed on a flight from Sialkot, Pakistan via Dubai. To the untrained eye, he was nothing more than another weary traveler stepping off a long-haul flight. His movements were smooth, his demeanor composed. CCTV footage later released by investigators showed Rashid wheeling his luggage with the steady rhythm of a man entirely at ease. He didn't fidget. He didn't glance nervously around the hall. He didn't break stride. If body language is often the first tell of a nervous courier, Rashid appeared to have mastered the art of stillness. Inside his suitcase, however, was a consignment that could never pass unnoticed: 18 kilograms of heroin, tightly wrapped and carefully concealed, destined for the streets of Britain. Unlike some smugglers who try to slip through security with false bottoms and suitcases or elaborate concealment tricks, Rashid's method was far less complicated. He carried the drugs directly in his checked luggage, counting on one thing to get him through: confidence. He seemed to believe that if he behaved like any ordinary passenger, customs officials would have no reason to look twice. And in fairness, his performance was convincing. To the average traveler passing by, Rashid was invisible, just another man pushing his bags toward the exit. But what he didn't realize was that border force officers had already singled him out. His name, his route, and his movements raised quiet red flags. And his calm exterior, far from erasing suspicion, only deepened it. Rashid was directed to a secondary search area. Officers began inspecting his baggage, lifting out clothing and personal effects until they reached the carefully wrapped packages buried within. What they uncovered was staggering: 18 kilograms of heroin of exceptionally high purity. Forensic analysis would later confirm purity levels between 66% and 71%, a level rarely seen by the time narcotics reach street circulation. In practical terms, it meant the consignment was worth an estimated £900,000, a figure that could multiply several times over once the heroin was cut and sold at street level. The calmness that had carried Rashid this far was shattered in an instant. The illusion of normality crumbled when confronted with the undeniable evidence now spread across the inspection table. For investigators, the drugs were already enough to secure charges. But the real insight into Rashid's role came from his mobile phone. Hidden among ordinary contacts and apps were WhatsApp messages that exposed the mechanics of the smuggling network. Rashid hadn't been acting alone. He was in constant communication with a handler in Pakistan, referred to simply as brother. The messages revealed a chilling level of control. As Rashid moved through each stage of his journey, brother offered instructions and reassurance, monitoring him almost like a puppet master pulling strings. One message in particular stood out to investigators. Just as Rashid approached airport security, his anxiety apparently rising, brother sent him a line meant to soothe: "Remain tension-free. God will be generous." The words, simple and spiritual on the surface, carried a darker weight in context. It was reassurance designed to steady Rashid's nerves, a reminder that he was just one cog in a far larger machine. To investigators, it was proof that Rashid was not a lone smuggler but a courier in a professional network that spanned continents. The phone evidence made one fact unmistakable: Rashid was not the mastermind. He was not the financier. He was not the handler. He was the courier, the one chosen to carry the risk while others remained safely offshore. This is the reality of international trafficking. Networks recruit men like Rashid with promises of money or pressure disguised as opportunity. They are given flights, instructions, sometimes even spiritual comfort, but in truth they are disposable. If caught, the organization simply finds another courier, another suitcase, another route. Rashid's calm demeanor may have fooled casual observers, but it did nothing to protect him from the inevitability of his role. His fate had been sealed the moment he agreed to carry those 18 kilograms. By May 2022, Rashid stood before Birmingham Crown Court. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The drugs in his luggage, the forensic confirmation of purity, the WhatsApp messages tying him to a handler abroad. There was no plausible denial. Faced with the inevitable, Rashid entered a guilty plea to the importation of Class A drugs. His calm composure in the airport gave way to the quiet resignation of a man who knew the weight of the law was bearing down on him. The sentence, 9 years in prison. For some, it may have seemed lenient compared to the value of the drugs involved, but the message was unmistakable. Rashid's attempt to mask a fortune in narcotics with nothing more than calm confidence had failed, and he would now spend nearly a decade behind bars. The story of Muhammad Uzziah Rashid is a stark reminder that confidence isn't enough to beat the system. He carried himself with the poise of a man who believed he could walk through customs unnoticed, but composure cannot erase the red flags of intelligence-led policing. For investigators, his case also underscored a wider truth. Couriers like Rashid are not unique. They are interchangeable links in an international chain, recruited, reassured, and discarded when caught. His calmness didn't save him. His loyalty to his handler didn't protect him. In the end, Rashid was just another disposable piece in a network far larger than himself. At Birmingham Airport, his story joined the growing list of cautionary tales. A reminder that no matter how convincing the performance, the system eventually sees through the mask. When the dust finally settled, the spectacle of Birmingham Airport's November 2024 sting gave way to the cold weight of courtroom justice. For Farzana Cowzer and her family, the masks of ordinary life had been stripped away. No longer were they travelers blending into the bustle of arrivals. They were defendants standing before a judge, their futures balanced on the evidence laid bare against them. At the heart of the case was Farzana Cowzer, the grandmother-turned-mastermind whose betrayal of family bonds had formed the backbone of the operation. The court described her as the linchpin, the strategist who had weaponized family loyalty to build an international pipeline of cocaine. Her sentence reflected the scale of her role, 13 years and 4 months in prison. A punishment that underscored the damage she had caused not only to her community, but to her own bloodline. Her children, once drawn in under her authority, faced their own reckoning. June Shafak, 33, who acted as her lieutenant, received 10 years and 9 months. Muhammad Amir Shafak, 28, entrusted as a courier, was handed 8 years and 9 months. Ume Muhammad, 22, another courier caught in the machinery of the plot, received 8 years and 1 month. Hamza Shafak, the youngest at just 17 when the smuggling runs took place, was dealt with separately as a youth. By the time of trial he had turned 18, and though his fate was postponed until October 2025, it was already clear that his life path had been altered irreversibly. Even those at the periphery of the family were not spared. Safaner, just 19 years old, received 7 years and 2 months, her youth unable to shield her from the severity of the conspiracy. Sarah Hussein, 27, the daughter-in-law, was given a 2-year sentence suspended for 2 years, narrowly escaping prison but marked forever by her involvement. And the lone outsider, Khaled Abdul Kawi, 36, a trusted friend pulled into the orbit of the Cowzer family, was sentenced to 10 years and 9 months. One by one the names were called, the sentences read, and the empire crumbled into fragments. What had once been presented to the community as a tightly knit family was revealed instead as a criminal syndicate, shattered by greed, loyalty twisted into chains, and a mother who had gambled with the futures of her children. The story of the Bradford family was more than a headline about drug trafficking. It was a cautionary tale of generational damage. Farzana's choices didn't just bring cocaine into Britain. They pulled teenagers into crime, handed them criminal records before adulthood, and robbed them of futures that might have been lived in education, careers, or family life. The irony was stark. A mother whose role is meant to nurture and protect, had instead sacrificed her own children on the altar of international crime. The bonds of trust that should have anchored her family became the very tools she used to expand her empire. When placed alongside the other cases at Birmingham Airport, a pattern emerges. Farzana Cowzer's family plot revealed the devastation caused when loyalty is weaponized, when a parent recruits their children not into safety but into danger. Majid Hussein's downfall demonstrated the fatal consequences of arrogance, how a single careless rap of heroin exposed an entire empire of drugs, weapons, and cash. Muhammad Uzziah Rashid's calm smuggle showed the futility of confidence, How even the smoothest performance cannot erase the fact that couriers are disposable, managed from afar and discarded when caught. Together, these stories strip away the myths of organized crime. They show that no matter how carefully orchestrated, no matter how powerful the empire, and no matter how calm the courier, the collapse is inevitable. Airports are more than transit points. They are mirrors reflecting the ingenuity of organized crime and the determination of law enforcement. Every carousel, every customs check, every boarding gate becomes a crossroads where greed meets vigilance, and where fortunes are either smuggled in or seized before they leave the ground. At Birmingham Airport, these three stories collided not just by coincidence, but by inevitability. Because where networks gamble with audacity, investigators wait with patience. And sooner or later the mask always slips. These stories are reminders that behind every flight and every suitcase, investigators are watching. Which of these three cases shocked you the most? The mother who sacrificed her children, the dealer undone by arrogance, or the courier fooled by false promises? Let us know in the comments. If you found this breakdown compelling, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next case. This has been Outsmart, where we uncover the hidden battles fought at Britain's airports.